Okay, let's talk about something that really ties people in knots. I think it's something many of us grapple with.
Hmm.
Wanting desperately to help an adult you care about, someone who's really struggling, but you just hit this wall. Like, how do I actually do this without making things worse?
Yeah.
How do you support them in a way that, empowers them, helps them get back on their feet instead of just, well, enabling the situation?
It's such a common and frankly painful dilemma, isn't
It
it?
really is.
That murky territory between genuine care and maybe accidentally facilitating unhealthy patterns.
Right.
And it feels complex because it is complex. You're
Yeah.
dealing with finances, boundaries, all the emotional dynamics,
Yeah.
just everything.
Absolutely. And that's precisely why we wanted to do this deep dive. We've gone through a whole stack of sources, articles, expert interviews, even some personal accounts,
Right.
specifically looking at how to support an adult who's having a hard time and really zeroing in on that critical balance point,
Right.
helping versus enabling.
And this deep dive, it's really tailored for you, the listener. We're here to unpack the most important insights we found in all this material.
Yeah, the goal is to help you navigate these incredibly difficult relationship dynamics with hopefully a bit more clarity and confidence.
So let's get into it.
Okay, so diving into the sources. One of the very first things that just jumps out is, wow, how much power there is tied to financial support,
Mm.
and therefore how much potential for complication when you're helping a struggling adult.
It really is where the rubber meets the road for so many people.
Mm.
And the experts, I mean, the sources are incredibly direct on this point.
How so?
They basically say, look, if you are giving financial support, it needs to it. It absolutely needs to come with very clear conditions.
That feels kind of counterintuitive, though, doesn't it? Especially if it's someone you love unconditionally. Like, shouldn't the support also be unconditional?
See, and that's the trap, according to these sources.
Yes.
That's exactly the trap. They argue that giving money without conditions, it almost inevitably leads to deep resentment.
On your side, you mean, the support?
Yes, on your side. Because you're watching the money potentially being used in ways that contradict the person's well-being or maybe their stated goals.
Okay.
The sources really emphasize that while unconditional love is vital, unconditional financial support, that's a completely different animal.
Right.
In fact, they suggest that sometimes the most loving thing you can actually do is to stop providing that financial safety net.
Wow. Stop the money. That feels like pulling the ultimate lever, doesn't it?
It does.
Especially, for parents with adult children, it's often the thing people avoid doing at all costs.
Is because
Good.
it feels incredibly harsh. And the sources bring up this really powerful concept related to that. It's the idea of rock bottom.
Right. We usually think of the person struggling hitting rock bottom, that moment where they finally realize, okay, I need to change.
Exactly, that pivotal point where they feel the consequences fully.
Yeah.
But here's the thing the sources highlight. Often, it's the supporter who hits their own rock bottom first.
Ah, interesting. The person giving the help.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's that point you reach after you've tried everything else you can think of. Talking, pleading, providing endless help, and nothing is working.
And you're suffering now.
Exactly. You are now suffering significantly yourself. Maybe it's financially, maybe emotionally, maybe both.
And that suffering forces a kind of brutal realization.
Precisely. That there's one significant thing you haven't truly tried or maybe haven't fully committed to.
Which is stopping the money.
Stopping the unconditional subsidy. Yes. At some point, you realize that by continuing to unconditionally pay for rent or bills or debt or just providing a completely free place to live.
You might actually be enabling the very behaviors you're trying to help them overcome.
Exactly. You might be part of the problem, unintentionally.
This connects right back to that quote mentioned in the sources. I think it was Dr. Waldinger. Don't shield them from the consequences of what they choose.
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah.
The experts here are really clear.
Yeah.
You owe people love, acceptance, compassion, absolutely. But you do not inherently owe them money, especially if that money is essentially propping up their avoidance of facing consequences.
Okay.
Because, as the sources argue, if you are funding any part of someone's life while they are, say, refusing to get help for addiction or mental health issues.
Or not holding down a job, skipping responsibilities.
Right. Or being dishonest or engaging in other self-destructive patterns, then you are, maybe unintentionally, but you are part of the problem.
So giving money without conditions is enabling behavior in those contexts.
That's what the sources strongly suggest, yes.
Okay, so if unconditional financial support is generally harmful or at least risky, How do the sources suggest conditional support should actually look? Do they give, like, specific examples?
They do, yeah, and they get quite granular, actually. It's about setting terms that are directly tied to the support being given.
Like what?
Things like, okay, you can continue to live here if you actively maintain sobriety and attend your recovery meetings. That's a common one.
Or something like, I will pay for your therapy sessions as long as you and your therapist agree to a monthly check-in with me about your progress and treatment plan.
Yep, that's another example. Or, I'll cover your college tuition and books as long as you maintain a specific GPA, say a 3.0,
Yep.
and pass all your classes.
Okay.
Or even in a real crisis situation. Look, I will cover your rent, your phone, basic expenses if you commit to and enter inpatient treatment for your eating disorder this week.
Those sound clear on paper, but the hardest part must be when they don't agree to the conditions. Or worse, maybe they agree at first, but then they violate them. What do the sources say about that moment?
This is the point where the sources become very firm and honestly very difficult.
Oh, okay.
They state unequivocally, if the person refuses the conditions, refuses treatment, refuses to get a job, or breaks the terms you've mutually agreed upon, you have to follow through.
Meaning?
You have to withdraw all financial support.
And when they say all, they really mean, like, everything.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Not just the big stuff like rent. They mean no more paying the phone bill.
Wow.
No access to your streaming accounts, no buying their groceries, no paying for Ubers, nothing.
Jeez.
The sources even discuss being prepared to take a hit to your own credit if you happen to co-sign a lease or a loan.
That feels brutal. I mean, the person might become incredibly angry or manipulative,
Oh, for sure.
or even spiral further down, at least initially, right?
It is incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
Which is precisely why the unconditional bailing out is so common, because it feels easier in the short term.
Yeah.
But the sources are direct. Removing that financial prop is often the only thing left, the only tool you have to create the necessary pressure for change when nothing else has worked.
It's your boundary, your power.
Exactly. And it might be the only thing that finally creates a rock bottom for them, not just for you.
Okay, so this brings us back to that phrase you mentioned from the sources, let them. It seems like a core principle here is let them struggle, let them violate the terms of your support, and then let me follow through and cut them off financially.
Exactly. Allowing those natural consequences, even when it's incredibly painful to watch. That's described as a fundamental act of believing in their capacity to eventually respond to reality.
Okay. Now, the sources also, they turn the perspective around, right? They speak to the person who is receiving the support.
They do.
So if you, as an adult, are having your therapy, your rent, education, phone bill, whatever, any significant part of your life paid for by someone else, usually parents, what's the takeaway for that person?
Yeah, the sources are pretty blunt here too.
Yeah.
Basically, if someone is funding your life, they absolutely get a vote on how you're living it. You don't get to accept someone else's money for your basic needs or your well-being, and then, cop an attitude or demand total privacy when they express opinions about the choices you're making.
With the life their money is supporting. Exactly like the example they gave. If your parents are paying for your therapy, but you refuse to sign a release so they can talk to the therapist or just get basic updates. The sources called that a form of gaslighting, I think.
Yes, because you're accepting the help, but denying the supporter the very thing, the assurance, the peace of mind that their money is being used effectively or that you're actually engaging.
Right.
The message is pretty clear. If you're tired of someone having opinions about your life,
Start paying your own bills.
that's the most direct path to independence. As long as you are financially reliant on someone else, they have a legitimate, if maybe uncomfortable, window into your life. True independence means financial independence.
And the sources point out something deeper too, right? That often the frustration isn't really about the parents' opinions.
Yeah, that's a key insight.
It's actually frustration with yourself for still needing their money. You're not really mad at them.
You're mad that you haven't yet achieved the financial independence that would free you from their influence or their perceived influence.
Right. Okay.
And the sources really drive this point home with a powerful personal example. It was about the impact of stopping those unconditional bailouts.
Yeah, I remember this one.
The author recounts a time early in her marriage when she and her husband, Chris, were in just a deep financial hole.
His restaurant business was failing.
Yeah, failing badly. They couldn't pay personal bills. They were genuinely struggling, like even for groceries. a really tough spot.
And Chris went to his brother hoping for a significant loan or for the business. A
It's
lifeline.
He did, and his brother said no,
Just no.
just no. The author describes the brother's response as incredibly difficult to hear at the time, but ultimately just honest.
What did he say exactly?
Something like, look, I'm sorry if me not giving you this money is the reason why the business fails and you go bankrupt, but I won't bail you out. You have got to figure out how to do this yourself.
Wow, that sounds incredibly harsh in the moment. Like really cold.
It does, absolutely.
Yeah.
But the sources emphasize the brother wasn't being cruel. He was being truthful.
Okay.
He was recognizing the dynamic, the pattern maybe. He wasn't responsible for Chris's business problems or for rescuing him from the consequences of his choices. It was painful for Chris, sure, but it was reality.
And that refusal, that no,
Yep.
ultimately led Chris to his own rock bottom, didn't it? Related to the business and how he was coping.
Yes, the business wasn't paying him. It was a massive drain. And he was also struggling significantly with alcohol and other self-destructive behaviors under all that stress.
Right.
Exactly. And the sources make the point. If his brother had given him that loan, it likely would have just prolonged an already devastating situation.
Kick the can down the road.
Right. Potentially digging Chris even deeper into debt and maybe deeper into his self-destructive habits.
Yeah.
The brother's no meant Chris was finally faced with no external rescue option,
Forcing him to look inward.
forcing him to look inward and find his own way out.
Yeah.
That moment, that financial rock bottom triggered by the boundary his brother set, it changed his life because it connected him with his own internal resolve to change things.
What's really fascinating there, though, is the sources are careful to note that the brother saying no to the money wasn't saying a no to support entirely.
Crucially, yes. That's a really important distinction they make. His brother still listened. He validated Chris's feelings, expressed compassion.
But drew a line at the cash.
Right. And by refusing the loan, he was implicitly communicating, I believe in your ability to figure this out.
Which highlights that there are countless ways to provide genuine support beyond just, writing a check or handing over cash.
Absolutely.
So if allowing consequences and setting those financial boundaries, the things you stop doing, or make conditional if that's the let them part,
Right.
what do the sources say about the flip side? The active ways you do help. What's the let me part of this?
Okay, yeah. So the sources shift focus here to this idea of creating an environment for healing and change.
An environment.
Yeah, this isn't about swooping in and solving their problems for them. It's about actively making it easier for them to do the difficult work of getting better themselves.
Okay, environment. What does that actually look like in this context? It sounds a little abstract.
Well, think about the physical, emotional, and logistical space around a person that influences their well-being.
Okay.
Is their living space, their access to healthy food, the presence or absence of clutter, who they spend time with, the structures or routines available to them.
Got it.
So the core question becomes, how can I, the supporter, help create an environment that removes obstacles and makes the path towards change, towards getting better, just a little bit easier for them to walk?
The sources give that really powerful personal example of this, don't they? Describing the author's own experience with severe postpartum depression.
Yes, after her first daughter was born, she describes being completely depleted, physically and mentally, just in a really dark place, unable to even be left alone with a baby safely.
Yeah.
And what she remembers most profoundly from that time was that in that state, she couldn't articulate what she needed. She couldn't even form the thoughts.
So people didn't keep asking, what can I do? Or what you want?
Yeah, exactly. Because she wouldn't have known the answer. Instead, they just showed up.
Yeah.
And they created an environment that facilitated her healing, even when she felt totally incapable of asking for help or directing anything.
Right. Like people came and just quietly cleaned her house. Her parents stayed for weeks just handling the absolute essentials. A friend came over specifically so her husband could go to work.
Yeah.
And instead of asking what was needed, the friend just started doing laundry or making simple food while the author just rested or, just existed nearby.
And the in-laws, planning those low-key outings, remember that?
Yeah. Like taking her and the baby to a flower show,
Yeah.
gently getting her out of the house, back into contact with the world, even when she still felt completely numb.
It really underscores a key insight from these sources. When someone is deep in a struggle, whether it's depression, grief, addiction recovery, job loss, whatever, they often genuinely don't know what they want or need.
Or they feel like such a burden, they'll just say, nothing, I'm fine.
Right. So the let me create the environment principle means instead of waiting for them to ask, you proactively do things.
Hmm.
Tangible things that make their immediate surroundings and daily life more conducive to healing.
Okay, that makes sense.
Exactly. The sources list some really concrete examples, like just showing up with no expectations, dropping off prepared meals,
Practical stuff.
very practical, helping to physically clean or organize their space. Just cleaning clutter can be huge for someone's mental state. Filling their fridge with easy, healthy food.
Even just opening blinds and windows, letting in light and air.
Yes,
Yeah.
doing their laundry, creating helpful playlists, sending thoughtful care packages, simple things.
I remember that suggestion from Casey Davis in the sources about just bringing a tower of paper plates and plastic cutlery for a new mom.
Yes, it's such a simple, practical thing, but it removes one small hurdle, one source of stress.
Totally.
Or like texting a friend who's in recovery, simply to say, hey, thinking of you, no need to reply, just want you to know you're not alone.
That's powerful.
Or inviting someone who's just left treatment, or maybe is just struggling with isolation, to a regular, low-pressure activity, like a coffee walk or a yoga class.
And maybe even offering to pick them up so they don't have the added stress of managing the logistics or the anxiety of getting there.
Exactly.
These examples feel so different from just handing over money, don't they?
Completely different. They're active, tangible ways of providing scaffolding.
Scaffolding, I like that. You're not taking over the building process.
Right, you're just setting up the structure that makes it easier for them to build their own way back into life. It's practical support, shared presence, gentle reintegration.
It's described as kind of standing alongside them, holding the light high, being a beacon of hope.
Without trying to pull them out of the water
Yeah.
yourself. And it's rooted in believing, fundamentally, in their ability to get better eventually.
Because people stay stuck sometimes because they don't believe they can face the pain or the challenge of change.
That's what the sources suggest. And by actively creating that supportive environment, by being that consistent positive presence, you can help them by letting them borrow your belief from you, as one source put it.
Borrow your belief.
Yeah, when someone feels truly accepted, loved, and supported in these practical, non-conditional ways through the environment you help create, it makes it easier for them to eventually tap into their own belief, their own ability to step back into life.
Okay, so pulling these insights together then. The sources frame let them. That's the principle of trusting and empowering the other person.
Empowering them to navigate their difficulties, allowing those natural consequences to happen.
And offering financial or significant material support only with clear, agreed-upon conditions.
Exactly.
And then let me is the complementary principle. That's focused on the supporter's active role.
Your active role in providing practical, non-conditional support, creating the environment, the resources, the gentle presence needed.
Needed for the struggling person to do the work of healing for themselves.
Precisely.
The core message really echoing through all these sources seems to be that true effective help isn't about solving problems for someone or shielding them from reality. It's about creating the space, providing the tools, setting necessary boundaries.
And holding the belief for them.
Yeah.
Until they are ready and able to do it themselves.
Yeah.
Because you simply cannot want someone's healing more than they want it for themselves.
Right. This deep dive, it really has clarified just how nuanced this is, how difficult, but also how essential that distinction is between truly supportive behavior and enabling.
Especially when it comes to money, financial entanglement, and allowing people to face the reality of their choices.
It really underscores the potential power of carefully applied conditional support.
And the crucial necessity sometimes of allowing natural consequences to play out, even when it's hard.
And that surprising significance of the supporter's own boundary setting, their own rock-bottom moment maybe, as a catalyst for change for everyone involved.
Yeah, that was a big one. And it also highlights the profound, often overlooked effectiveness of actively creating an environment for healing.
Through practical help and unwavering belief.
Rather than just relying solely on financial bailouts as the main way you offer support.
So the let them principle respects their agency, the teaching power of consequences.
While let me focuses on your power to build a foundation and the conditions for their recovery process without taking it over.
It all seems to circle back to that fundamental truth these sources present. Genuine support believes in the other person's capability.
Yes. Their capability to face their struggles and get better.
Yeah.
But it recognizes that this transformation, it happens on their timeline.
When they are ready.
When they are ready. often prompted by facing consequences or being surrounded by that supportive environment you helped create, not by being rescued over and over again.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, here's maybe a question to consider for yourself, for you listening.
Mhm.
How might your current ways of offering support, even, with the very best intentions, how might they be unintentionally creating a cushion?
Yeah.
A cushion that prevents someone you care about from facing the consequences they might actually need to face to grow.
Or flipping it.
Mm-hmm.
If you are currently on the receiving end of support,
Mm.
how might your reliance on that support be impacting your own willingness or maybe your urgency to embark on your own journey toward independence and healing?
Definitely something to think about.